We are back with Despina Priala, Talking Law here, and some people say they spend more time shopping for shoes rather than getting their contracts properly vetted before they sign. This is quite alarming, Despina. Do you think it's accurate?
That can't be right, surely.
Sometimes I do wonder. I have to say, look, we've come across it over the years, and people are looking for cheap rates. And there's lots of companies that advertise cheap conveyancing rates, for example, $300-400 will look after your purchase or sale for you. And it's extraordinarily cheap. And I always say, well, they couldn't possibly get the service that they need by an experienced lawyer for their purchase or sale. And I've said it before, buying and selling property in Queensland particularly is complex. It's not simple. And most people think it is simple. There's nothing to it. It's the exact opposite.
I guess when everything goes perfectly, that's great, but that hardly ever happens, does it? There's always something.
Well, you have to ask yourself, in those instances, and it rarely happens, why does it go perfect? Is it because you've got someone experienced to make sure that it does actually go smoothly or not? And you probably find that you do. But it's very rare. But look, yeah, it's concerning, and I think if we can talk about it a bit and where things can go wrong, we have talked about it before, but if we go through some real life examples and as to why it's important to get someone experienced to look after that purchase and sale, in the context of the overall value too, because you are either selling your property worth a particular price or you're buying a property worth a particular price, and isn't it worth you spending the right amount of money to get the right advice?
Well, that's true too, because I mean, you're talking about a significant amount of money. I mean, these days there's not much, under $500,000. Well, there's basically nothing under $500,000. But like, if you're talking about $1 million or multi-million-dollar purchase, why would you quibble over a few $1,000s?
Exactly. So you'll find that the fees that are charged by experienced property lawyers to look after that are generally less than 1% of your purchase price. And really, that's nothing compared to $300-400. I mean, that just won't give you anything, in my view. And I'm firmly against those firms that do charge a cheap rate, because it's providing a service that you need, and you couldn't possibly do it for that price.
Of course, yeah. And obviously, like you said before, buying and selling is so complex in Queensland.
It is.
New South Wales as well. So what are we looking at? What are the issues?
So in Queensland, we've talked about this before, but in Queensland, the reason why it is complex, or one of the main reasons, is it is buyer beware. So you do have to understand that unlike New South Wales, you do have to do all of your own searches. You do have to make your own inquiries. It's buyer beware. You've got to make that inquiries yourself as a buyer, and the obligation's on you, not on the vendor per se. The vendor has to disclose certain things, but not everything, and not to the extent like that you do find in New South Wales. So really, you can say to yourself, anything can go wrong in a property or in a purchase or a sale, and there are a number of things. For example, and we can start from the very beginning. We get a contract and you're buying. The buyer often doesn't even contact their lender until a week into it, or doesn't tell us, oh yeah, well, I'm using bank XYZ. And that in itself has just delayed you a whole week. And we talked recently about deadlines and due dates and how important they are, and people don't realise that you have to meet those deadlines. So if you take your time and you're casual and you don't contact your bank straight away, you're going to have problems, okay? Same with selling. So when you sell and you've got a mortgage, you've got to contact your bank pretty quickly, because you've got a mortgage, they've got to release it. You don't just wave a magic wand and assume that they're going to take care of it. The bank doesn't know you're selling. You've got to contact them. You've got to sign a form called a discharge authority form. I actually had a client recently ask me, well, what's that? So people still don't know what's a discharge authority form. It's a form you have to sign with your bank to say, I am selling my property. You are now authorised to go and arrange for the release of mortgage. Now, if you don't do that, come settlement, you won't be settling, because you have to get that mortgage off. You have to start the process. We can't do it because we're not authorised to talk to the bank until you put us down on that piece of paper to say we're your lawyer.
And another layer to that with the banks is postcodes apparently are an issue as well.
That's right. So when you talk to your bank early, you have to ask them, is this property in a restricted area? And you might wonder, well, what does that mean? Believe it or not, the banks do have restricted areas. They don't perhaps necessarily tell you that or market that, and they wouldn't market that. But there are areas and pockets on the Gold Coast and other places in Queensland where the banks consider those a restricted area to lend for a variety of reasons, and they know that up front. There's no point for you waiting around for a week or 2 weeks and then for the bank to tell you.
And then getting that answer.
Which means they've done the wrong thing by you, because the banks know early on those postcode areas and whether it's in a restricted area or not.
So it can come down to a specific street in a suburb.
Sometimes it can. Sometimes it can. So they were finding that through the pandemic, and we've been looking at that recently, and we've come across it recently for clients. So it is something of concern, and you are within your rights to ask your bank early on, is this property in a restricted area? So look, another issue is pest and building. So most 9 times out of 10, your contract is subject to a pest and building report. So the inspector goes along, inspects the property, gives you a report. The buyers, our clients, give us the report, don't even look at it and give it to us and say, well, have a look. We say, well, we're not builders or engineers or pest spraying people. We're your lawyers. So you need to talk to that person, have them identify the issues, tell us where it is in the report. And then once we go through that, then they go, oh, okay, well, I want all these items fixed. Okay, well, that's a process. So we've got to go through that. We've got to ask the seller, do you agree to fix it? The seller may say yes or no. If they say no, then we might ask, do you agree to reduce the price? So we can fix it, or the buyer can fix it. They can say yes or no. All of that's a process. It's not just, magically it comes, with the territory and it just happens. It doesn't work that way. We actually have to do that work for you, and you have to tell us what you want.
And of course, it all takes time.
It all takes time, exactly. So, and that's very important. So finance, we've talked about that. So that's very important. There's risks of losing your contract. We talked about that recently if you don't meet your deadlines. There's risks of losing your deposit if you don't meet those deadlines, and that you actually get to the end and you can't settle and you're stuck. And then you might lose the deposits that you've already paid to the seller because you're in breach of contract.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things that can happen. Other things, for example, we have clients that say, okay, well, I want to have early access. So I've got settlement next week. I want to get in early and put in my possessions. Oh, do you? Okay, well, that's not a given. So we have to find out, is it empty? Is the seller still living there?
Yeah.
The seller.
Is there a tenant there, for example?
That's right. They might be packing up too. And we have all sorts of issues on the settlement date. Removalist trucks is a big one. I've booked my removalist truck. Oh, have you? Okay. Well, good to tell us on the day. Would have been good to tell us a few days earlier, because we'd like to let the other side know, when are you leaving? Our client's got a truck booked. They're coming at this time. They've got to unload. So it can be a nightmare. We've had sometimes trucks sitting there for hours in the street waiting, and the client's paying. Unfortunately, for them just sitting there waiting
Tick,
with
tick,
their
tick, tick.
items,
Yep.
tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
So that's an issue. It's not something that's given. Early possession's another one. So it happens a lot where you can't settle. So if you can't settle on the day, or if the seller can't settle because their bank may not be ready, so the buyer may say, oh, this is really inconvenient. Can I get early possession? What does that mean? Well, I can get possession of the property without paying for it yet. And can I do that because I've got nowhere to live, because I've told my landlord that I'm moving out on this date? So all these things can culminate. And the seller can say yes or no. And then we've got a problem on our hands. So when I say it's not simple, there are things that can pop up all the time. Right? And we can see the red flags generally, but you've got to communicate with us, communicate with your lawyers, tell them what's going on, what you intend to do, tell everybody else what's going on early, tell your banks and other people, and get things done early.
From what you're saying here, it's all about communication. Really, something basic like that.
Planning, communication,
research,
getting in early. And even when you do all those things, and it's great that you do, sometimes things can still go wrong, nothing to do with you. It's to do with the other party, right? And you need to have someone experienced that can navigate the waters for you. And that's the whole point, what we started at the beginning about having someone experienced. How could you possibly have someone to manage all of that for you?
For $300?
Impossible.
Forget it. Yeah.
Impossible. So your interest will be compromised, perhaps, with having someone looking after it so cheaply. So the message is, yes, perhaps you, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, perhaps. Yes.
Lay off the shoe shop and get a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly right. So spend the quality time in a quality lawyer looking after your matter.
Great advice. Thanks, Despina. We'll see you again next week. Now, in the meantime, if anyone would like to contact you and have a chat, what's the best way to do that?
So best way to do that is to call our office 55291 294, or you can jump on our website and have a look at our details to email. So you can email admin@prialalegal.com.au, and of course you can check out our YouTube channel.
Yep, on YouTube you just type in Priala, Priala, and we'll catch you next week.
See you then.
Thank you.